This is the voice of AJ Maestas for our presentation today. Including Q&A, we should be done in less than 35 minutes. And this presentation is designed to provide brands, properties, and agencies with the knowledge and tools necessary to understand how sports fans are using social media and how these insights can be used by sellers and marketers to drive results. If you want to submit a question during the webinar, just use the chat box at the bottom of the toolbox on the right of your screen, and we will do our best to address your question. Well, I personally couldn't be more excited about this study. Everywhere you look in the media, there are stats and quotes on social, digital, and mobile media. But in our research on existing research out there, we couldn't find a comprehensive, high-quality study that was specific to the sports world. You know, one that can be relied on for day-to-day decision-making that you know is representative of all these different scenarios we covered in this study. So with that said, we obviously created one in partnership with Wasserman. On your screen now, you'll see the three people who will present today. On the left is John Harper. John is the Senior Vice President of Consulting at Wasserman Media Group. In his consulting role, he works with Wasserman clients such as Amex and Pepsi, Verizon, Scott's, Turf, Builder, and Nationwide Insurance. He also heads up their analytic practice there. We really pride ourselves at Navigate on working with first-class dorks, and John fits right in. In all seriousness, he came to Wasserman from the Boston Consulting Group. Before that, he was at Nike in brand strategy, retail development, and sports marketing. It doesn't hurt that he also went to Harvard Business School. He's just one of our kind of people, I guess I'd like to say. So anyway, it's one of the many things we love about Wasserman. The type of minds and strategy you get out of their team just isn't common in sports. On the far right of your screen is a picture there of Zach Sugarman. He is also a true tech geek with over 8 years of digital marketing and social media experience, creating award-winning campaigns and initiatives for brands and technology firms in his time at Wasserman. Clients Zach has worked with include Travis Pastrana, Puma, Target, Hot Wheels, and Boost Mobile, among many others. And that work ranges from social, digital, and mobile media, including distribution. This voice belongs to AJ Maestas. I'm the one with the fat face you see there in the middle of your screen. I'm the founder of Navigate Research, where we specialize in measuring the value and impact of marketing investments in the sports and entertainment world. Our clients range from just about any league office you can name, from the National Rugby League in Australia to the National Football League in the United States. 13 of the top 15 sponsorship agencies we work with, including our great friends here at Wasserman. All of the major networks we have worked with, and there's about roughly 40 brands that we work with to assess part or all of their investment portfolio. So one final housekeeping note before we kick things off here. We will be following up with your questions that we can't get to during today's webinar, including some of the insights that we're allowed to share from the presentation afterwards. So if you ask a question and we don't get to it, don't worry, we will follow up. Unfortunately, we can't give it all away for free, including the study. If we did, there'd be no Navigate or Wasserman out there to fund this type of research. But we are here to help, and we do want to be a resource to you beyond just today's session. So to kick things off, you'll see the trend on your screen here of internet traffic by desktops versus mobile devices. This is one of dozens of examples that I can share and follow up from today's session that reveal national and global trends in social, digital, and mobile media. If I could summarize what's on your screen as well as all those other insights for you that I'm not showing you, basically the growth rate and use and connection to consumers as a first destination for content and information is far outpacing advertising and sponsorship revenue. In short, there's a very large and growing opportunity that remains available for sellers and marketers through social, digital, and mobile. This slide you're looking at here reveals time spent versus ad revenue and further emphasizes this opportunity. If you look at the slide from left to right, you see some of the traditional world mediums that we use in marketing, and then heading over there to the internet and mobile. And if you take a look at those gray bars on the left in print, the high bar that's 25%, that's basically consumer time spent, and the blue bar is associated ad revenue. This is beyond just sports. This is across the entire media world. Obviously, you see the giant gaps exist in print and mobile, print on the far left and mobile on the far right. And what this says essentially is that despite the incredible growth rate of social and digital and mobile spending, it's actually not catching up to the rate at which consumers spend time on these mediums. Tells a pretty scary story there for print on the left, given that it's a struggling industry as it is and doesn't forecast to do great in the future. But what an interesting story over at mobile. And if you take a look at that, we estimate that to be a $20 billion opportunity in the United States alone. Again, this is the whole media world, not just sports specific, but it's a signal or a way to foreshadow what we're likely missing in our sports specific work as well. And one last slide I'll share with you real quick before I transition over is that I want to leave you with this sort of broad insight on social media and how it stacks up versus other marketing mediums. So what you're looking at is a media exposure efficiency curve that plots the major marketing mediums on a scale of impact as measured by lift in purchase intent and value or efficiency as measured by CPM. So you get the gist. It's pretty easy to read what's going on here. What's interesting is that most of these mediums fit a pretty standard curve on value and impact, which you might not expect since most of the marketing world, trades on the metric of CPM. The one great piece that lies way off this chart is up there in the upper left. That's social, and effectively what we're saying here, essentially, is what we're saying here is that at one of the lowest CPM prices, one of the most effective mediums can be purchased. It's just not on this curve, but other things that are expensive are, like sports, you can tell, which is the stadium you see there in the far upper right. That is basically in line with the value and impact measures. So that is to say, when you're out there selling or buying in the sports marketing world and people say it's a premium compared to media, that's a fact, but that fact is in line with how effective or impactful sports is on changing consumer behavior. So I'm about to hand things over to John Harper from Wasserman, but before I do, I want to share that we're just absolutely excited to be working with Wasserman as a partner in this study. I mentioned it before, but we really like to think of ourselves as serious dorks who are dedicated to quality research and measurement, and it just happens to be that we're also passionate and work in the sports and entertainment field. With Wasserman, we feel like we've found a team that's built in a similar fashion to us. I've already rattled off some of the accolades, but you understand that we're talking about all these great minds with former strategic consultants and so forth and so on. As I do hand things over to John and Zach, please know that they also brought something different to the table from our normal research. They really help this research come alive. As strategic consultants, they are able to overlay recommendations and consultation on how to take this research and turn it into revenue or turn it into growth in your brand.
Well, thanks very much, AJ. Really appreciate this, and to echo what AJ said off the top, as we at Wasserman began to bring the concept of the social media scoreboard to life, it was equally as important for us to align with a strategic partner in Navigate that produces high-quality thought leadership, but has deep expertise in the sports industry, and that, is very challenging balance to find. And we too are excited about the compelling insights that the study has surfaced on this topic, and we're equally as excited to be working together with Navigate on this study. So one point to emphasize, on that note is, as we collectively set out to bring this together, it was important for us to develop an intriguing storyline, not just a data report. And so the 4 questions on the screen here: how fans are using social media, the impact that it's having on their behaviors, the effectiveness of this channel, and ultimately how social media can be valued differently, really guided our collective research itself and ultimately became the foundation for the storyline that exists in this 60-plus page report that we've put together and would love to get in all of your hands. To provide you with some quick context on our approach very quickly, we did set out to be extremely comprehensive with a deep sample across a broad set of sports, teams, as well as sponsorships. We did focus on going deep in North America for this initial study to make sure that we got it right, but we do have a hope of replicating moving forward across other sports and other geographies. So there's certainly areas where we're going to continue to evolve moving forward. What we would like to do now, though, is first provide you a glimpse of some of the interesting insights that we feel really drove that storyline. But then I'll hand it off to my colleague, Zach, who will take you through how this information is being put to use with practical applications for yourselves, the teams and the brands, in driving unique activations and ultimately more value for the channel in sports, which, as we know, is your #1 goal. So moving on here, we collectively thought it would be most valuable to marry first the primary research with what social media leaders are actually doing in the space currently to set the stage. And we didn't want to just look at this as a primary research study. So as a starting point, we cataloged a year's worth of Facebook posts for a select number of teams in every sport, as well as a number of athletes where sports didn't have team-based entities. And we really wanted to understand the current landscape of both the volume of social media posts across sports, as well as how sponsors are being leveraged in the properties channels. And when we saw the wide variability that you're seeing here on the screen, we also dug deeper within the report into the sponsor-related posts themselves. This context really substantiated the opportunity to better understand fans' behavior and the effectiveness of this channel to provide properties, brands, and agencies more insight to help guide their decisions moving forward. So going back to those 4 set of questions, the first question we set out to answer was how fans are using social media in sports. Now, we all know, and it's no surprise, that social media engagement is very much pervasive across all consumers. But what we did find that sports fans were actually 10% more likely to engage with social media than non-fans. So with that as a backdrop, when we focus more specifically on sports fans, this visual highlights that almost 2/3 of fans are leveraging social media as a key source of sports information. Now, to some, this basic insight has been intuitive as we've talked through the study findings with others. And I think that's a point we want to emphasize now is, some of the benefits of this study is to bring the data to life that will help substantiate the intuition that exists out there. But on the other hand, others have found this surprisingly high, and we would expect this trend to continue upwards as we evolve the study in future years, aligned to the trends and the norms that we're seeing in the industry. So to note, the report itself will then dive deeper into this first question, into how social media is being used by fans and across the different sports, which shows some really compelling insights as you compare against different activities and against different sports.
Hey, John, this is AJ here. We have one question I think that's somewhat relevant here. Jennifer from National Geographic asks, is there one social media outlet that is more used or more important to the sports fans and organizations?
That's interesting. I mean, we don't believe there's really one platform to focus on within sports. Every platform really has a different role and purpose. And so to that end, I'd say the platform focus should really be aligned to your specific marketing objectives and what you're really trying to get out of how you're engaging with the sponsorship and with the platform itself. So there has been some additional analysis that we outline in the report that actually looks at a percentage of sports fans who use social media to follow their favorite team or sport, so looking at the by platform, as well as percentage of channel time that fans spend engaging with their favorite team and sport. So when you look at that analysis in the report, depending on whether your objectives are around, say, things like scale versus duration of engagement, different platforms may be more optimal to use than others.
Okay, thank you, or Jennifer thanks you.
No, my pleasure. Okay, so having a basic understanding of how fans are using social media, we were then more curious to dive into that second question, which is how that engagement itself is affecting fans' behavior. And we thought this would be most interesting for you all as well. And we found that it's very interesting that over half of all fans across sports take some sort of action as a result of their engagement with social media. Now, the spike here in MLS also stood out for us and was somewhat, a consistent spike across many of the results through the report, so which is one powerful sub-story. However, overall, the impact on behavior is pretty consistent as seen across sports here. But from here, we were then really interested, okay, it's one thing to understand, are they taking action, but what is it they're actually doing? So we were really interested in what specific actions fans were actually taking, which is what we see on this next slide. So in the report, we do provide some views with more dense data where percentages would be available across the table seen here. But for the purposes of our discussion today, we really wanted to highlight the different actions that are taking as a result of social media, which you can see down the left-hand side, and how those actions compare across sports, with those colors indicating more of a little bit of a heat map around where there's an over or under index for the total sports fans overall. So a couple of insights that we drew from our analysis as noted here, and certainly there are others, but we thought it was interesting that MLS fans overall are taking more action as a result of social media versus fans in other sports. And we think we can attribute part of that to one of the earlier slides that we talked about when we looked at the analysis of all the Facebook posts and really looked at or saw how MLS was not only using social media more in general, but their percentage of sponsor posts were also higher. Also, the demographic of MLS, makes this pass the sniff test, if you will. From an NHL perspective, we found that fans leveraging social media as a channel for ticket purchases more than any other sports was indicative of a potential opportunity to continue to leverage that channel in this way. And then NASCAR fans, as we looked at this, are more likely than other sports to purchase products from a sponsor as a result of social media activity, which we thought was actually interesting as well. So at this point, I'm going to pause. Let me quick hand it back over to AJ to address another question and talk about a few of the other insights.
Sure, John. Yeah, one of the most, let me take you through this slide first, actually. One of the most basic but valuable benefits of research is the chance to listen to the representative voice of your customer. So what's kind of fun about the slide you're looking at here is that this was an open-ended question, just asking people, what would they like to have, via social media as a way to connect, to their favorite teams and leagues. As you can see, if you just read that headline up there, over 60% of the responses could be bundled into just sort of offers and insights and interaction with an athlete. So, 60% of open-ended questions clustering into that few possible answers. We thought that was a pretty rare thing, at least in our research it was. If you look further in the screen into that circle and breaking down some of this feedback, I think there's a few things that might jump out at you. Obviously, there's the personal connectivity that shows up in multiple locations, getting closer to athletes, kind of getting in the locker room, the behind-the-scenes look. One of the things we're not going to share, just because we don't have time, is that, but we found it interesting, people actually align closer via social media to teams than they do athletes. So they're asking for athlete insights here, but I think there's a common misperception out there that a tweet from an athlete is more influential than the team itself or other forms of social media. Our findings are actually showing the opposite, that teams outrank in influence athletes specifically. And then, of course, as you can imagine, as is true in most forms of sports and rights, local trumps national as far as team inventory versus league inventory and messaging. But anyway, if you take a moment to look at this list, we think it's a really interesting way to ask yourself if your messaging is meeting what your audience is looking for. John, let me go ahead and give it back to you here.
You bet. Thanks, AJ. So after getting an understanding of fans' actions and as a result of social media, we were really eager to uncover the effectiveness of this channel as it relates to sports sponsorships. And as AJ alluded to off the top, one of our collective ingoing hypotheses was that social media would deliver more effective measures versus other channels the further fans progress through the marketing journey or through the traditional purchase funnel. And we were real excited actually to see this prove out in the study. So what we were able to do through the study is isolate the most dominant channels where fans became aware of sponsorship, recognizing that recalling sponsorships is going to come through a host of channels. We're able to isolate the most dominant channels, and then we evaluated key metrics against those that became aware of sponsorships most dominantly through social media and then through more traditional channels. So the snapshot here on the screen illustrates that those that became aware of sponsorships through social media were almost 80% more likely to have a positive perception of sponsor brands than those recalling sponsors from other channels. And this trend was obviously very interesting to us, and it was even more pronounced when we looked at things like purchase intent of sponsor brands, and a lot of those details are outlined further in the study. So with this in hand, we then married the analysis with a database of typical or average values across the different elements of sponsorship, which really then drove us to an aha moment. As you can see on this slide, based on the study, social media is delivering higher effectiveness levels when looking at brand perception and purchase intent. However, the point highlighted in the orange in the bottom right, and as AJ referred to earlier on, currently social media is valued lowest on a CPM basis. So intuitively, this to us signaled a significant opportunity for social media to deliver more value to both properties and brands than it is today in the traditional model. Now, a key point to emphasize is that we do recognize, and we do highlight in the study as well, that traditional channels are still leading the charge and getting fans into the top of the funnel, which does play into the value story certainly on the traditional side. However, the results here indicate that there's certainly more value to be captured by leveraging social media initiatives as you take fans through that marketing journey, and we'll hit on that in a couple minutes here. So that said, in the final part of the story of the report, we lay out a framework for how to think about value differently. Now, we certainly don't expect this to be a holy grail, but we do believe that there is a compelling way to think about value differently, focusing on key marketing objectives of a particular partnership, a brand and property partnership, and ultimately basing it on how fans engage through the marketing journey versus how many broad impressions are received. And in the report, we actually play this framework out to provide a sense of how that value can look depending on the different marketing objectives. But rather than talk, in theory and frameworks, we did want to illustrate how these insights in the report and this line of thinking around value can be practically applied to ultimately generate revenue and value for the brand, which we know is your primary goal on the phone here. So let me hand it over to Zach to take you through just that.
Thanks, John. So I get the pleasure of explaining to everyone listening how we put these insights into practical use to make you all some more money. Be that more revenue from your current partners, new revenue from new sponsor partners through activating differently, or ancillary revenue streams by increasing conversions for ticketing and merchandise. So as John and AJ alluded to from the study's findings, there's more value in engagement, be that clicking on something, liking, sharing, commenting, retweeting, etc. Now, if you think about it for a second, it makes sense intuitively, as engagements are active metrics that measure a person taking an action as opposed to the traditional and more passive metric of impressions. Furthermore, from the study, we found that assets have different values based on how they drive consumers through the purchase funnel, whether that's awareness, positive perception, or purchase intent. So in general, as a brand or property, you're going to want to think of yourself as a platform with many channels that facilitate engaging experiences, not a publisher, in order to properly value your digital assets and drive more revenue. So let's look at a real example from a professional sports franchise to really illustrate this point further. We measured a branded content franchise across Facebook and Instagram that the team self-identified and sold to a partner as premium social media content. We looked at 10 posts over a 2-month time period during the season. On the whole, these 10 posts generated 33 million impressions. So using an industry standard CPM of $10, it leads to $3.3 million in value. For those that don't like math, that's 33 million times $10 divided by 1,000. The result, $3.3 million. Now, if we look at engagements, clicking, sharing, etc., these same 10 posts had 5 million engaged users in the same time frame. So if we apply a conservative cost per engagement metric of 75 cents, the overall value is 3.75 million for the same post when you're measuring based off engagements. The math there is 5 million times 75 cents equals 3.75 million. So you can see from this example, it's more advantageous to value your content based off of engagements. So how do you guys as a team or property really take advantage of this opportunity? I want to show a best-in-class example last year that the Tottenham Hotspurs did really by leveraging their insights to activate across multiple platforms for a campaign, #CallingAllSpurs. The campaign overall had 5 million plus engaged users. It started with a video featuring the team's players, which prompted fans to submit a photo of them showing their support for the Tottenham Hotspurs using the unique hashtag. All those fan photos were then pulled into a microsite, which had a countdown ticker of spots remaining, where the fans had a chance to have their photo selected by the team and physically imprinted into a photo mosaic that was on the wall at White Hart Lane in the tunnel. It was the last thing that the players would see as they ran out onto the pitch. Great idea. Brands don't want to put logos on something anymore. They really want to make content. So the Spurs, using all their analytics, figured out how they can engage fans in a meaningful manner and make some content with their partners. It definitely paid off from a dollar standpoint. The Under Armour deal with Tottenham Hotspurs was a $16 million deal, and their new kit sponsor recently sold for $26 million. And it's really paying attention to insights like these, executing these types of campaigns, and then showing the value back to the partners that has led to such financial success for the team. Now, another example, when you're thinking of social media, it's obviously an integral part of everyone's marketing strategy. I don't think that's being debated anymore. But in order to optimize and effectively integrate it into your efforts, you really got to pay attention to your competitive set and use the data for practical improvement. Always want to benchmark against your competitors, and the way to do that, we always say, is you want to evangelize analytics internally and externally. Don't be afraid of the data. Use it, listen to it, and it'll help you optimize your posting behavior, content strategies, and really differentiate yourselves from the competitors. So if you have the right tools in place, you're pulling the numbers, but most importantly, interpreting the data. You want to share that internally and externally. This is a snapshot we work with the Miami Heat to do exactly this internally. And they were very successful in improving their own efforts, which just drove more reach, more engagements, and hence more revenue. In addition, having this type of data and evangelizing it internally made their sales team more confident and gave them some talking points when they were meeting with brands that really helped them package and sell more effectively. Another best-in-class example to end this with from a case study standpoint would be the San Francisco 49ers. They do a fantastic job all the time in maximizing their reach and engagement through content, and the way they are successful on such a continuous basis is by using insights. They use the insights to identify ways to craft the breakthrough and shareable content. The specific example here is under the Quest for Six campaign, where they prompted fans to download this image and then submit a photo using the hashtag Quest for Six for one element. It was pulled into the microsite, which was actually integrated into their overall website for fans to see. But they used this hashtag throughout most content initiatives that showed off the team. So by paying attention to insights, they were able to create Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Vine-specific content all under the same hashtag, and that was optimized per each platform in terms of length, in terms of copy type, in terms of posting times, and even day of the week. And the images you see there, of course, wrestler Ric Flair came in for a team meeting, did his classic Ric Flair scream, as he would do before fighting guys back in the day. It was really fun. It's a behind-the-scenes look. They knew from insights that fans really gravitated towards it. They took the one 15-minute meeting they had with Ric Flair. They made a full video for it that went out on Facebook, a 15-second specific one that went on Instagram. They did a Vine video as well. And they used all their internal reporting to figure out the best ways to push that out and at the right time to really maximize their engagement. Because, again, when you have more reach, you have more engagement, it can increase value and lead to more revenue. So those were some examples of real-life applications of how we have used this study, both on our own and then knowing with the San Francisco 49ers and Tottenham Hotspurs just as best-in-class examples.
Well, thank you, Zach. Just some great examples. I appreciate you bringing those to life. If I could summarize something that I think has been a reoccurring theme throughout the discussion, it's that our findings from this research study consistently show social, digital, and mobile as having an incredibly low-cost way to drive really powerful impact. And that powerful impact applies to growing your audience, driving attendance, and that includes ticket sales and group ticket sales, some incredible results there, and amplifying the positive impact of sponsorship. through activation. There's just, we just think the world's onto something really special here, and they're actually behind the ball a little bit relative to the true power and impact of this on a per dollar basis. You know, for the sake of time here, Zach, I'm just going to limit us to just a couple questions here. If you don't mind, this one comes from a good friend of mine, Ellen Lucy. She asks, some sports properties do a nice job with social media. Is there a good example of a sponsor who uses it well? Is there an example of a sponsor who uses their partnership to build their business on social media?
Yeah, you know, Verizon, I'm a huge fan of some of their initiatives, especially most recently. I mean, full transparency, they are a client of Wasserman, but I think no one will argue with how awesome this activation was. They launched the first social media-powered light show on the Empire State Building around the Super Bowl. They partnered with the Empire State Building to do it. And what they did was Verizon had daily Twitter conversations encouraging fans to break down the game's best matchups. So who's going to dominate the passing game, who will own the running game, and, of course, who's going to win the Super Bowl. To determine the winner each night, we had and in partnership with us, we had an algorithm that tracked these conversations via social media under the hashtag who's going to win. And they turned the fans' predictions into the light show on the Empire State Building with colors representative of the Seahawks or Broncos. So depending on how the fans voted, the colors were shown on the Empire State Building accordingly. In just 1 week, the campaign had 475,000 tweets with the hashtag who's going to win from over 280,000 unique people. It had about 12 million overall impressions, which from a visibility standpoint was over 5,000% increase for the Verizon Twitter channel. It was overall, I know, the most successful live Twitter battle in ESPN's history. And so clearly Verizon used this partnership, one, it was buzzworthy, but it increased their overall social media footprint being a partner of the NFL and specifically for the Super Bowl. And my favorite component from the campaign was that Verizon recognized the success and the brand equity under the hashtag who's going to win. They had a microsite for this as well. They actually kept it live and brought it back recently for the Indy 500. And they did something similar, no light show, but they still crowdsourced fans and kind of asked them who's going to win and had a great engaging experience on this microsite where fans could come in and pick which driver they thought were going to win the Indy 500. And then I know, you know, if we got time for one more question, AJS, I want to come in from John Kernet at the Hawks. Asking, how do you see brands aligning digital activation to properly track conversion success beyond simple brand impression? It's one we actually get a lot, and I think we've been talking a lot about data, but really the answer is it brings importance of you have to establish these key performance indicator benchmarks up front. Each brand is going to be different based off of what they want, but as a property and a team, you can use your historical data to show the type of engagements that you can get on each platform and the type of content. So you know from your historical data how you can value these engagements, the conversions, and time spent. But from a brand standpoint, you really need to have this conversation up front to see what they want. So a quick example, we recently did a campaign with Seiko where it was very clear they wanted to increase their email distribution list, build their CRM database. So they sponsor Landon Donovan and Hope Solo. What we did was we pitted them against each other where fans had a chance to win a watch under Seiko Square Off. But really the entry mechanism was submitting an email. And Seiko judged the success of that campaign based off of the emails that they got to add to their distribution list as opposed to the reach or retweet or engagements that were generated from Landon Donovan and Hope Solo's social media posts. So really we had to establish that up front, and based off of their goals and objectives and us knowing the historical data and paying attention to insights, figuring out what we can do, it allowed us to craft our strategy accordingly.
And by the way, for those of us who have lived in places like Seattle with the Seahawks or Chicago with the Blackhawks, the Hawks he's referring to are the Atlanta Hawks. So that's the John we heard from there in the question. To stay true to our promise of being 35 minutes long here, I think we'll cut ourselves off. But you will hear from someone on the Navigate or Wasserman team if your question didn't get answered. Please do feel free to ask additional questions as well. There is a decent amount of content we can share without putting ourselves out of business here, right? And we do want to answer your questions, and we do want to be helped you in the future. So you will hear from someone in follow-up. We also are recording this, and we'll send you a link to a recorded version that you can share with coworkers or those who were not able to attend live in person with us today. Thank you very much for your time. On behalf of Wasserman and Navigate, I'd like to thank you for all sharing your time, and hope to see you all out there someday very soon.